September 8, 1941. Farmingdale, Long Island, New York. The Republic Aviation Factory floor trembles beneath the weight of something unprecedented. Alexander Kartveli stands before a machine that defies every principle of aerial combat the world has accepted as gospel. 8 tons of steel, aluminum, and ambition. 450 miles per hour promised from an airframe that outweighs a Spitfire by 3,000 pounds. Around him, visiting Army Air Forces officers exchange glances. Skeptical, some openly dismissive. One mutters into his colleague's ear, "Too heavy to fly." The P-47 Thunderbolt gleams under factory lights like a monument to American industrial excess. Its radial engine, a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp, dominates the fuselage with the subtlety of a locomotive. 18 cylinders, 2,400 horsepower, 8 50 caliber machine guns embedded in wings thick enough to walk upon. Kartveli, the Georgian-born engineer who fled Soviet purges to design American warplanes, does not argue with the doubters. He has learned that metal answers, questions words cannot. The first prototype awaits its test flight. History will not remember the skeptics' names, but it will remember what this machine becomes, and the men who learned to fear its shadow across European skies. The story of the P-47 begins not with innovation, but with desperation disguised as confidence. In 1940, the United States Army Air Corps issues requirements for a new interceptor, a lightweight, nimble fighter to match the graceful Spitfires and Messerschmitts dancing through European skies. Republic Aviation proposes exactly that, a conventional design, elegant in its modesty. Then France falls. Poland has already been consumed. Britain fights alone against the Luftwaffe's mechanized tide. American military attachés flood Washington with reports that transform abstract strategic discussions into visceral terror. The numbers are devastating. German fighters operate above 25,000 feet with impunity. Their pilots breathe pure oxygen while interceptors below them gasp in thinning air. Speed, they report, matters less than altitude. Firepower matters less than the ability to reach the enemy. The Army changes everything. New specifications. Turbo supercharger mandatory. Combat ceiling above 35,000 feet. Heavy armament for bomber escort. Republic's delicate interceptor becomes obsolete before metal is cut. Kartveli returns to his drafting table and begins again. The turbo supercharger, a complex mechanism that compresses thin high-altitude air before feeding it to the engine, cannot be miniaturized. It requires ducting, piping, and systems that add hundreds of pounds. The Pratt & Whitney R2800, the most powerful radial engine in American production, becomes the only option. But radial engines create drag, massive frontal area that contradicts every aerodynamic principle of speed. The solution emerges not from elegance but from brute pragmatism. Kartveli designs a duct system that routes air from beneath the engine, through channels in the fuselage, past the turbo supercharger mounted in the rear fuselage, and exhausts it through the belly. The complexity is staggering. The weight grows catastrophic. Engineers calculate 7 tons empty, 8 tons combat loaded. For comparison, the P-51 Mustang will weigh less than 6 tons fully armed. Factory workers watch the prototype take shape with something between pride and doubt. This machine embodies American industrial philosophy, the belief that problems can be solved not through scarcity's clever compromises, but through abundance's overwhelming application of resources. More engine, more guns, more armor, more fuel, more airplane. Critics multiply their objections. Too heavy, they repeat. The wings will snap in a dive. The climb rate will be suicidal. German fighters will dance around it like hornets around a bull. None of them understand yet. The bull can charge at terminal velocity. May 6, 1941. Test pilot Lowry Brabham straps into the XP-47B prototype with the methodical calm of a man who has made peace with physics. The cockpit surrounds him. Massive, spacious compared to the cramped confines of other fighters. Visibility is excellent forward, compromised by the enormous engine rising before him like the prow of a ship. He can barely see the ground during taxi. Republic engineers crowd the flight line, calculations in hand, prayers unspoken. They have built the heaviest single-engine fighter in the world. Theory suggests it should fly. Theory has been wrong before. Brabham advances the throttle. The R2800 responds with a thunder that vibrates in human bone marrow. 2,400 horses pulling against brakes. He releases. The acceleration is not delicate. It is inevitability made kinetic. The tail lifts. The runway blurs. At 90 knots, the machine that critics condemned as too heavy to fly rotates skyward with smooth, undeniable grace. The test flight lasts 8 minutes. Brabham lands, taxis back, shuts down the engine. He unbuckles in silence. Engineers surround him, desperate for assessment. He removes his flight helmet and delivers 3 words that will be repeated in bars from Long Island to London. She flies beautifully. But flying beautifully in test conditions and surviving combat are different species of achievement. The Army orders 13 pre-production aircraft. Republic begins tooling for mass production, a gamble measured in millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs, before combat evaluation proves the concept viable. The first production models emerge in late 1942. Army Air Forces pilots arrive for conversion training with skepticism honed by experience. They have flown P-40s and P-39s, nimble aircraft betrayed by inadequate performance. They examine the P-47 with the critical eye of men whose lives depend on their mount's capabilities. The weight disturbs them, 8 tons. They calculate turn radius, climb rate, energy retention. The numbers are not encouraging. Their instructors offer tactical doctrine still being written. Don't turn with the enemy. Don't climb with the enemy. Don't fight their fight. The pilots exchange glances. What then? You dive, the instructor says. You dive faster and harder than anything in the sky. You make one pass, guns blazing, and if the target survives, you keep diving. You extend. You return with altitude advantage. You repeat. It sounds like cowardice wrapped in strategy. None of them understand yet. They are learning to hunt with gravity as their weapon. January 1943. RAF Debden, England. The 56th Fighter Group arrives from the United States carrying the cocky confidence of young men who have not yet met combat. Their P-47Cs gleam on British soil, massive American machines among the sleek Spitfires that have defended these skies for 3 years. British pilots observe with polite doubt. Jugs, they nickname them, short for juggernaut. The Americans hear flying milk bottles. The translation is universal. Too big, too heavy, too clumsy for the knife fight war over occupied Europe. Colonel Hubert Zemke commands the 56th with a rare combination of tactical brilliance and brutal honesty. He has read every combat report from the Mediterranean theater. He knows what awaits. Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, flown by pilots with 3 years of combat experience. The Luftwaffe has killed the best pilots of Poland, France, and Britain. They operate from German soil, with short flight times, familiar territory, and infrastructure that allows multiple sorties daily. The Americans will fly deep into enemy territory, at maximum range, where engine failure means death or captivity. They will fight outnumbered because bomber escort demands staying with the bombers, not pursuing individual targets. They will face pilots who know these skies as intimately as Americans know their hometown streets. Zemke gathers his men. The P-47 is not a Spitfire, he says. Don't try to make it one. It dives like nothing the Germans have encountered. It survives damage that would disintegrate their machines. It carries enough ammunition to fight multiple engagements. He pauses. But if you turn with a 109, you will die learning why. The first combat missions are escort duty at 25,000 feet. The Thunderbolts climb for 40 minutes to reach operational altitude. The bombers they protect, B-17s and B-24s, crawl through flak-filled skies toward targets deep in the Reich. Luftwaffe fighters watch from above, conserving fuel, waiting for the American fighters to reach their range limit and turn back. Then they pounce on the bombers. The early combats are humbling. FW-190s bait the P-47s into turning engagements. The Thunderbolts try to comply. Instinct demands you face your attacker, and the German fighters simply outturn them, slide onto their tails, and open fire. Some American pilots bail out over Holland and Belgium. Others nurse damaged aircraft back to England, landing with hydraulics shot away, control surfaces shredded. The statistics are blunt. First month, unfavorable kill ratio. The skeptics' predictions appear vindicated. The P-47 seems too heavy to win. But within defeat, scattered observations accumulate like evidence at a crime scene. Pilots return from combat with stories that don't fit the narrative of failure. Lieutenant Robert Johnson describes diving away from 4 FW-190s, simply pushing the stick forward and accelerating through 450 miles per hour. The German fighters pursue, but cannot match his dive speed. They break off. unwilling to risk structural failure. Captain Walker Mahurin reports something even more remarkable. He dives on a 109, fires a 2-second burst, and continues diving past the target. The Messerschmitt pilot attempts pursuit, but his aircraft begins shedding pieces. Compressibility flutter at speeds his airframe was never designed to endure. The German pulls up to save his machine. Mahurin escapes untouched. Technical officers compile the data. The P-47's weight, that shameful burden the critics mocked, provides inertia that other fighters cannot match in a dive. While lighter aircraft accelerate quickly in descent, they also reach terminal velocity sooner, where drag equals gravity. The Thunderbolt, with its massive weight and aerodynamically clean design, simply keeps accelerating. Tests confirm dive speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, faster than any operational fighter in any air force. The tactical implications crystallize. Colonel Zemke issues new doctrine. Altitude is life, speed is survival, one pass is enough. The Thunderbolt groups begin every mission by climbing to 30,000 feet or higher, above the bombers, above the Luftwaffe's cruising altitude. They patrol, watching, conserving fuel. When German fighters commit to attacking the bomber stream, the P-47s roll into dives from above. The physics are unavoidable. A fighter at 25,000 feet intercepting bombers suddenly detects tracers from above and behind. He brakes, hard turn, maximum G-force, but the P-47 driver doesn't turn. He adjusts his dive angle slightly, keeps accelerating, and opens fire in a 2-second window of devastating convergence. 8 50-caliber guns firing 300 rounds per second total. The weight of fire is apocalyptic. If the target survives, the Thunderbolt doesn't circle back. It keeps diving, uses that speed to extend out of range, then converts velocity to altitude in a zoom climb that returns it above the enemy's ceiling. The German pilot, if still alive, faces a choice: pursue and sacrifice altitude energy, or let the American escape. Either way, he's no longer attacking bombers. The 56th Fighter Group begins killing Luftwaffe pilots. The ratio shifts. The skeptics grow quieter. March 1943. Intelligence reports from interrogated Luftwaffe pilots reveal something unexpected. Confusion mixed with frustration. They don't fight properly. One captured German ace complains to his American interrogators. They refuse engagement. They dive and run. The interrogator, a colonel who flew bombers over Germany, smiles without humor. Yes, he says, they do. The cultural clash is fundamental. German fighter doctrine, inherited from the First World War and refined through Spain and Poland, emphasizes individual dogfighting skill. The knights duel in 3 dimensions. Their pilots train for turning combat, energy management within traditional speed regimes, and positional geometry that assumes both aircraft operate under similar constraints. The highest aces earn glory through close-range kills, aircraft taken down in swirling furballs where skill trumps technology. The Americans are inventing something different: industrial warfare in the sky. The P-47 embodies a philosophy that offends European sensibilities: brute force over elegance, overwhelming resource application over clever efficiency. The turbo supercharger alone represents more engineering complexity than entire German training aircraft. The ammunition load, 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, exceeds what a Messerschmitt carries by 3 to 1. But the true revolution isn't visible in specifications. It's in replacement rates. Republic Aviation's Farmingdale factory, built with unlimited American capital and staffed by workers who will never face bombing raids, produces P-47s at rates the German aviation industry cannot comprehend. By late 1943, Republic will manufacture more fighters per month than Germany's entire industry combined. When a Thunderbolt is shot down, 2 more arrive to replace it. When a pilot is killed, 3 more finish training. The Luftwaffe faces inverse mathematics. Every lost pilot is irreplaceable. Training takes a year, fuel is scarce, and experienced instructors keep dying over Germany instead of teaching. Every lost fighter represents production capacity that could have built tank destroyers or submarines. The strategic calculus becomes merciless. Germany must win decisively with each engagement. America merely needs to survive and return tomorrow. Major Gerald Johnson, leading the 56th Aggressive 61st Fighter Squadron, articulates the strategy bluntly in a briefing. We're not here to be knights. We're here to kill German fighters until there aren't enough left to threaten the bombers. If that means diving away from a disadvantageous fight to live for tomorrow's mission, we dive. The Luftwaffe thinks that's cowardice. We know it's mathematics. The shift is psychological. Survival becomes victory. Each mission where bombers reach targets without catastrophic loss, regardless of individual dogfight outcomes, advances the inevitable. But mathematics, however inevitable, is written in blood before it's recorded in history books. The spring of 1943 tests whether American pilots can endure losses while tactics evolve. Mission after mission, the Thunderbolts escort bombers into Germany's industrial heart. Ruhr Valley, Hamburg, Berlin. The flak is apocalyptic. Black clouds of explosive hatred that fill the sky. Shrapnel tearing through aluminum. Pilots flying straight and level because evasion means abandoning the bombers. Second Lieutenant Francis Gabreski, a Polish-American whose family fled Europe's violence, learns to navigate the peculiar terror of combat at 30,000 feet. The first time tracers arc past his canopy, glowing baseballs of incendiary death, instinct screams for evasive maneuvers. But Zemke's doctrine echoes. Maintain position, maintain altitude. Wait for the attack that grants advantage. The waiting is torture. German fighters probe from the sun, diving in pairs, testing American discipline. One P-47 breaks formation, pursuing a FW-190 that lures him down into a trap. 4 more Germans pounce. The American's radio goes dead mid-transmission. His aircraft spirals through clouds, trailing fire. The remaining Thunderbolts hold formation. Gabreski watches it happen. The weight of restraint, forcing yourself not to help a dying comrade, violates every instinct of loyalty. But breaking formation means abandoning the bombers, which means the mission fails, which means the comrade died for nothing. The calculus is brutal. He grips his stick and maintains position. Later, after landing, pilots cluster in silence. They smoke cigarettes with trembling hands. The missing man's bunk remains exactly as he left it that morning. Rumpled sheets, a letter half written home, a photograph of a girl whose name they don't know. The reality is stark. Most of them will die before their tour completes. The odds are simple and merciless, yet something shifts in these moments of processing grief. The survivors understand now what the P-47 offers. Not invincibility, but survivability. Multiple pilots return with damage that would have disintegrated lighter aircraft. Wings shredded by cannon fire but still supporting flight. Fuselages punctured by dozens of holes but systems still functioning. Engines leaking oil and running rough but generating enough power to reach England. The R-2800's 18 cylinders create redundancy. You can lose several and still fly. The 8 fuel tanks, self-sealing and distributed throughout the airframe, prevent the single catastrophic fire that dooms so many fighters. The armor plating behind the pilot's seat stops 20mm rounds that would have killed him in a Spitfire. The P-47 doesn't make you immortal, but it gives you a chance to learn from mistakes. In 1943, over Germany, that chance is everything. Summer 1943. The tactical doctrine crystallizes through repetition and refinement. The 56th Fighter Group becomes the laboratory where theory meets combat, producing lessons distributed throughout the 8th Air Force. Zemke's pilots discover that the P-47's weight, combined with its powerful engine, creates energy retention characteristics unlike any fighter in service. Energy, the combination of speed and altitude, is the currency of aerial combat. Lighter fighters like the FW-190 can convert energy quickly into tight turns, but they bleed speed rapidly in those maneuvers. The Thunderbolt, with its massive inertia, maintains energy through gentler maneuvers. It doesn't turn as tight, but it holds its speed through the turn. This seemingly subtle difference becomes tactically decisive. Captain Robert Johnson pioneers the technique. When bounced by German fighters from above, he doesn't turn hard, which bleeds speed and leaves him vulnerable. Instead, he rolls inverted, pulls into a split S, a half-loop downward, and accelerates into a dive. The pursuing Germans, lighter and quicker in instantaneous turn rate, watch as the Thunderbolt simply extends away, accelerating through speeds they cannot match. Johnson levels out at 5,000 feet with sufficient energy to zoom climb back to altitude. The Germans, if they pursued, are now too low and too slow. If they didn't pursue, they've lost the engagement. The Luftwaffe begins adapting. Intelligence reports arrive describing new tactics. German fighters now attack from directly ahead of bomber formations, where P-47 escorts cannot easily react. The head-on pass lasts 2 seconds. combined closure rate exceeding 600 miles per hour. But FW-190s carry heavy nose-mounted cannon that can cripple bombers with a single burst. The Americans adapt in turn. Thunderbolts begin patrolling ahead of the bomber stream, intercepting German fighters during their setup phase. The 850 caliber guns, synchronized to converge 300 yards ahead, create a cone of destruction that shreds engines and cockpits. The Browning M2, originally designed to penetrate vehicle armor, tears through aircraft structures like fabric. Kill ratios improve. By August 1943, the 56th Fighter Group achieves parity with Luftwaffe units, 1 loss for 1 kill. By September, the ratio tilts American, 2 kills per loss. By October, 3-1. The skeptics who mock the P-47's weight fall silent, not because they're convinced by argument, but because combat reports speak louder than theory. Yet the most significant transformation isn't visible in statistics. It's psychological. American pilots stop flying defensively. They begin hunting. October 1943. Jever Airfield, northern Germany. Luftwaffe pilots gather in their briefing room, a converted barn that still smells of livestock and damp earth. The war has aged them prematurely. Young men with 1,000-yard stares discussing death in technical terms. They know the Americans are coming. They always come. The only question is when. Hauptmann Josef Sepp Wurmheller, a veteran with 47 kills, briefs his staffel on the changing tactical environment. The Thunderbolts, he says, are becoming dangerous. A year ago, this would have drawn laughter. Now the assembled pilots nod grimly. They've lost friends to the American juggernaut, pilots who dismissed the P-47 as easy prey and learned fatally otherwise. They don't chase, Wurmheller continues. If you bait them, they ignore you. If you attack their bombers, they come from above with altitude advantage. If you try to climb after them, they dive away. He pauses. They've turned their weakness into strength. They've made the heavy fighter effective by refusing to fight the way we want them to fight. The implication hangs unspoken. The Americans have learned faster than the Germans can adapt. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine depends on superior training and individual skill. But American pilots aren't fighting individual duels. They're flying coordinated operations where individual glory matters less than collective success. It's industrial logic applied to aerial combat. Meanwhile, over England, the P-47 undergoes continuous improvement. Engineers install water injection systems that boost engine power to 2,500 horsepower for emergency use. Paddle blade propellers improve climb rate and acceleration. Underwing fuel tanks extend range, allowing escort deep into Germany. The Thunderbolt evolves not through radical redesign but through incremental refinement, the American engineering philosophy of build it strong, then make it stronger. By late 1943, 9 fighter groups operate P-47s in the European theater. They fly from England, North Africa, Italy. Everywhere they appear, the tactical pattern repeats. Establish altitude advantage, intercept German fighters before they reach bombers, engage in slashing high-speed attacks that exploit the P-47's dive performance and heavy armament. Refuse turning combat. Survive to fight tomorrow. The nickname changes. Jug remains, but pilots begin calling it something else. The Unbreakable. Stories circulate of Thunderbolts returning with hundreds of holes. Wings shredded, engines barely running, yet still flying. Pilots develop superstitious faith in their aircraft's toughness. In a war where luck matters as much as skill, the P-47 gives men extra chances to be lucky. December 1943. The aerial war reaches industrial crescendo. The 8th Air Force commits to around-the-clock bombardment, Americans by day, British by night, designed to shatter Germany's ability to produce weapons. The strategic logic is sound. Destroy the factories, win the war without invading. But implementation requires bombers to penetrate German airspace, defended by the most sophisticated air defense network ever constructed. The Luftwaffe throws everything at the bomber streams. Single-engine fighters, twin-engine destroyers mounting heavy cannon, rocket-firing interceptors designed specifically to kill B-17s. German pilots adopt increasingly desperate tactics, ramming attacks, air-to-air bombing, timed attacks coordinated with flak barrages. The losses are unsustainable. On October 14, 1943, Black Thursday, the 8th Air Force loses 60 bombers and 600 men over Schweinfurt. If the ratio continues, strategic bombardment will become strategically impossible. The P-47 groups cannot prevent these losses alone. Their range, even with external tanks, limits them to targets within 300 miles of England. Beyond that radius, bombers fly unescorted, and German fighters wait in formations of 50 or more, attacking with coordinated ferocity. The mathematics are brutal. Each B-17 lost represents 10 trained aircrew, industrial resources equivalent to 5 tanks, and mission effectiveness reduced. But the Thunderbolt proves essential for what it can protect. Missions within its escort radius show dramatically lower losses. Bomber crews request Little Friends, their nickname for American fighters. With desperate gratitude, they watch the P-47s weave above them, massive and somehow reassuring, like airborne bodyguards. When German fighters appear, the Thunderbolts roll into their signature diving attacks, tracers streaming, and the Luftwaffe breaks off or dies. Francis Gabreski, promoted to captain and flight leader, achieves his 10th kill in December. A Messerschmitt 109 destroyed during a head-on pass. The German pilot, young and aggressive, apparently believed he could out-energy the Thunderbolt in a climbing fight. He was wrong. Gabreski's 8 guns fired for 2 seconds. The 109 disintegrated, pieces tumbling through winter sky. After landing, Gabreski's crew chief counts bullet holes in his aircraft. 17. 2 in the engine cowling, 8 in the wings, 7 in the fuselage. None hit critical systems. The armor held. The fuel tanks self-sealed. The R-2800 never missed a beat. Gabreski walks around his aircraft, touching each hole, offering silent thanks to engineers in Farmingdale who built redundancy and toughness into every component. "She's ugly," the crew chief says, "but she brings you home." Gabreski nods. Beautiful where it counts. January 1944. The strategic picture transforms with the arrival of the P-51 Mustang, a fighter with range to escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The Mustang's performance at altitude matches or exceeds the P-47's, and its lighter weight provides dogfighting advantages in traditional turning combat. Some observers predict the Thunderbolt will be relegated to secondary roles. They misunderstand what the P-47 has become. The 9th Air Force, supporting ground operations for the upcoming invasion of France, requests Thunderbolts specifically, not because they're the most elegant fighters, but because they're the most survivable. The mission profile changes. Low-altitude attacks against bridges, trains, vehicles, troop concentrations. Flying at 500 feet through intense flak, pilots need aircraft that can absorb punishment and still fly. The P-47 proves ideal. Its radial engine, with cylinders arranged in a ring, survives battle damage that would destroy inline engines. Coolant lines can be hit without immediate catastrophic failure. The airframe's structural strength allows violent low-altitude maneuvers, pulling up from strafing runs, dodging trees and buildings, surviving mid-air collisions with debris. Colonel Zemke transitions the 56th to fighter bomber operations. The Thunderbolt now carries bombs, rockets, and napalm while retaining full gun armament. A single P-47 delivers ordnance equivalent to a light bomber, but with the speed and maneuverability to evade interception. They attack in formations of 16 or 32 aircraft, saturating targets with overwhelming firepower. The Germans begin to fear the Thunderbolt for different reasons. Previously, it was dangerous only to fighter pilots. Now it threatens everything: supply columns, rail networks, communication centers, headquarters. The Jabos, German slang for fighter bombers, become the soundtrack of retreat. Soldiers learn to recognize the R-2800's distinctive sound, a deep, rhythmic thunder that precedes devastation. Robert Johnson, by now an ace with 27 kills, leads a mission against a railway marshalling yard near Ham. Flak fills the sky. Black bursts, shrapnel rattling against aluminum. He rolls into his attack, releases bombs at 2,000 feet, pulls up through the explosions. His windscreen cracks from shrapnel impact. The aircraft shudders, but the engine runs smooth. Controls respond, and he climbs away. Below, the rail yard burns. Secondary explosions ripple through ammunition cars. The infrastructure of German logistics, the mundane machinery that moves soldiers and supplies, collapses under methodical American destruction. This isn't the romantic aerial combat of 1940. This is industrial war, systematic, relentless, inevitable. The critics who mocked the P-47's weight never imagined it would help win the war from 500 feet. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The skies over Normandy fill with Allied aircraft. 3,000 sorties establishing absolute air superiority over the invasion beaches. Among them, Thunderbolts fly low cover, protecting troops from any German aircraft brave or foolish enough to challenge the Armada. The Luftwaffe, once masters of European skies, manage fewer than 300 sorties total. They've been bled dry over Germany, their experienced pilots dead, their replacement pilots inadequately trained, their fuel reserves critically depleted. The P-47's role on D-Day encapsulates its evolution. High-altitude bomber escort has given way to ground attack, air superiority, battlefield interdiction. The Thunderbolt groups strafe German positions, destroy transport, suppress anti-aircraft guns. The soldiers below, Americans, British, Canadians storming Hitler's Atlantic Wall, fight beneath an umbrella of American air power that the Wehrmacht cannot penetrate. Captain Walker Mahurin, back from his second combat tour, watches the invasion from England. He's been grounded, his skills now more valuable training new pilots than risking his life in combat. He thinks about the skeptics who dismissed the P-47 as too heavy. He thinks about the German pilots who underestimated it. He thinks about the transformation he's witnessed, a flawed experimental fighter becoming the workhorse of American air supremacy. The statistics tell the story. By June 1944, P-47 groups have destroyed more than 4,000 German aircraft, half in aerial combat, half on the ground. They've dropped tens of thousands of tons of bombs, fired millions of rounds of ammunition, flown hundreds of thousands of sorties. The cost was steep, hundreds of pilots killed, thousands of aircraft lost, but the ratio always favored the Americans. For every P-47 lost, 2 or 3 German fighters were destroyed. For every American pilot killed, German industry struggled to replace the aircraft, fuel, and infrastructure destroyed. The Thunderbolt never became beloved in the way pilots loved the Spitfire or Mustang. It was too pragmatic, too industrial, too much a weapon and too little a work of art. But the men who flew it developed something deeper than affection. They developed trust. Trust born from seeing their aircraft absorb damage that should have been fatal. Trust born from watching the R-2800 keep running despite battle damage. Trust born from counting holes after missions and realizing they should be dead, but the Thunderbolt brought them home. In the end, that trust mattered more than speed or elegance or any aesthetic quality. Trust keeps men alive to fight tomorrow. April 1945. The war in Europe enters its final weeks. Allied armies advance from west and east, crushing the Third Reich between them. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of European skies, exists now only in scattered remnants. A few experienced pilots flying obsolete aircraft from grass strips with insufficient fuel. The P-47 groups fly almost unopposed, attacking targets of opportunity, destroying the last vestiges of organized German resistance. Francis Gabreski, returned from a German POW camp after being shot down in July 1944, reviews the final statistics. He finished his first tour with 28 kills, making him one of the top American aces in Europe. But the numbers that matter most aren't his personal tally, they're the collective achievement. Republic Aviation produced 15,736 P-47 Thunderbolts between 1942 and 1945. They served in every theater: Europe, Pacific, Mediterranean, China, Burma, India. They flew more missions than any other American fighter. They destroyed more ground targets than any other aircraft in the European theater. They brought more pilots home alive than their lighter, more agile contemporaries. The final kill ratio: 4.6 German aircraft destroyed for every P-47 lost in air combat. The survival rate for pilots in Thunderbolts exceeded those in other fighters by 20%. The aircraft that critics condemned as too heavy to fly became statistically the most survivable American fighter of the war. But statistics cannot capture what the P-47 represented: the triumph of industrial pragmatism over elegant theory. European air forces, shaped by resource scarcity and aristocratic martial traditions, designed fighters as thoroughbreds, light, nimble, demanding skill to master. The Americans, blessed with seemingly unlimited resources and unconstrained by tradition, built a warhorse: heavy, powerful, forgiving of mistakes, survivable under punishment. German engineers, interrogated after the war, expressed professional respect mixed with incomprehension. "You solved problems by adding," one says, "more engine, more armor, more guns. We tried to solve problems by perfecting." He pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Your approach required resources we didn't have, but it worked. That's what matters. The revelation is not about technology, it's about philosophy. The P-47 succeeded not because it was the best fighter in abstract terms, but because it was the right fighter for how America fought. Systematically, industrially, with overwhelming resource application and acceptance that losses were inevitable, but sustainability was achievable. The machine that was too heavy to fly taught the world that heavy can win, if you build enough of them and use them right. December 1945, Farmingdale, Long Island. The Republic Aviation factory floor, so recently thunderous with wartime production, falls silent. The last P-47 rolls off the assembly line, a machine destined for storage, not combat. The war is over. The factories that built 16,000 Thunderbolts in 3 years now face peacetime's slower rhythms. Alexander Kartveli walks the empty production floor, past workstations where welders and riveters once labored around the clock. He thinks about September 1941 when skeptics dismissed his design as too heavy to fly. He thinks about the 4 years that followed, the deaths, the victories, the evolution from experimental failure to indispensable weapon. The P-47's combat record speaks with finality. 3,752 aerial victories in Europe alone, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 86,000 railway cars wrecked, 6,000 armored vehicles eliminated. But Kartveli knows the true measure isn't tonnage destroyed. It's pilots who came home. Thousands of young men survived because the Thunderbolt's designers chose toughness over elegance, redundancy over efficiency, survivability over theoretical perfection. History will remember the Spitfire as the romantic hero of the Battle of Britain. History will celebrate the Mustang as the long-range escort that conquered German skies. But the P-47 Thunderbolt, ugly, pragmatic, heavy, did something more fundamental. It proved that American industrial philosophy could win wars, not through individual brilliance or martial tradition, but through mass production of robust, survivable weapons wielded by adequately trained pilots in sufficient numbers to achieve statistical inevitability. The skeptics were not wrong to question whether 8 tons could fly gracefully. They were wrong to assume grace mattered more than results. The German pilots who dismissed the Thunderbolt as a clumsy opponent were not wrong about its handling limitations. They were wrong to assume that agility trumps altitude, dive speed, and firepower deployed tactically. The P-47's legacy is not inspiration, it's validation. Validation that pragmatism defeats perfectionism, that industrial strength conquers martial elegance, that survival matters more than style. The men who flew it didn't write poetry about their mount. They simply trusted it to bring them home. And when historians count the cost of victory, that trust, earned through medals' testimony under fire, stands as the Thunderbolt's truest achievement. They called it too heavy to fly. It flew anyway. And in flying, it changed what too heavy could mean, from condemnation to confession that the critics never understood what they were measuring.